Welcome to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner, and this is where we make investing fun, simple, and real. I'm way excited for this particular episode. I'm going to introduce you to a friend of mine, Dan Ryder. And we've recently become friends and acquaintances. Sometimes I'll bring on people I've known for years. The reason I'm excited about Dan is I've been trying to learn. I just feel like there's been something I've missed in the DeFi game. And he is the founder and owner of Prime DeFi, and he's going to demystify the DeFi. And we got tons of questions. So we're going to talk crypto. We're going to talk about decentralized finance. It's going to be a great show. Like and subscribe to the channel for sure. And always remember to drop by cashflowbonus.com. We have so many great resources for people who want to take action. People consume a lot of content, and there's a lot of content creation, a lot of content consumption, but not a lot of action. And the thing that will change your life and move the needle is habits. There's knowledge to know what to do, and then when you start doing things a lot, they become a habit. When you find people who become wealthy, it's very much due to the combination of learning things and developing habits. And speaking of learning things, Dan Ryder from Prime DeFi, welcome to the program, and a big thank you for being willing to share some of your day with our audience. Thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure, Andy. Thanks so much for having me.
So let's start here. Before you're authoring a book, and it's an interesting title because they're for many people they've been mining this type of gold, so there is a hidden gold mine. But before we get into your book and into what Prime DeFi does for people, tell me a little bit about your background and what brought you to this point.
Yeah, man, I've lived multiple career paths at this point. I started off playing the kind of cliche game of life that my parents told me to do, which is, go to school, go to college, get a good job, don't work as hard as I am. My dad was in manual labor. He owned his own business, self-employed, but he always, steered us towards, hey, go be a doctor, go be a lawyer, right? So I kind of went through that path, found myself in the healthcare space, had an infatuation with the military at a young age. I was in the Air Force for a few years, and I loved that experience, but I kind of felt trapped. And initially I thought maybe I just wasn't made for the military long term. But what I found was once I started getting jobs in the private sector in healthcare, I was in leadership roles, and it was interesting, but there was just always something that still made me feel trapped. And I realized eventually that I was called to entrepreneurship, and I wasn't meant to build someone else's roller coaster. I'm a builder. I got to build things, and so long story short, I had to discover what my interests are, and I found a passion for marketing. Eventually launched my own agency, a small boutique marketing agency. We help people scale advertising campaigns. And as that started happening, I was always a student of wealth building. I remember, when I was a teenager reading the Rich Dad series and other books by guys like Rick Edelman on just building wealth. And I was just so excited to do the right thing when I started making real money. And so that always followed me through my jobs. And then as an entrepreneur, I started earning more money. I started doing well for myself, and I discovered crypto. And I started getting into that. And over the years, crypto evolved, and decentralized finance was birthed. The crypto landscape allowed for that, and we could talk a little bit about that. But once I discovered that, I don't even remember quite honestly how it happened, but I just realized after a few months of playing around with this industry for myself that I was becoming an expert without realizing it. I was investing in crypto conservatively through DeFi opportunities, and I found that most people who are even considering themselves crypto people, which there's not that many, especially if you won time 2-3 years ago, to say the least, they didn't even know about DeFi. And so I realized wow, there's a real education gap, and I'm really into this stuff. And so as an experiment, I launched a program to try to teach a few people, see if I could pull it off. and actually teach people my process. And then it worked, and people, were into it. And we had a nasty bear market in 2022 when we launched Prime DeFi under a different name at the time. And what I found was that people were still interested, even in a bear market, because of our approach, which was more conservative, cash flow focused. I know you love cash flow. It was resonating, and so it just kept growing. It even in a down market, it was growing because we were teaching people a way to maneuver through it and get results. And so I just kind of doubled down on that, and now that's my full-time focus. I'm growing our brand, Prime DeFi. It's a investor community where we provide education to master the world of decentralized finance and crypto investing.
And for those, you mentioned Prime DeFi, you can just go to primedefi.com. That's primedefi.com. So as you listen to Dan, want to learn more about what he does and how you can learn to do the same, that'd be the website to drop by. Let's talk a little bit about, well, first of all, thank you for your military service. That's an interesting background, because the military, my son didn't decide to go to the Air Force Academy, but they invited him on a recruiting trip. He's a basketball player, and Coach Scott's amazing, but it was amazing to visit that campus. I hadn't been there. When I played basketball, they were in our conference, and I hadn't been there in 30 years, and it was really fun to see the beauty of that campus. But the thing that's interesting about military is this: when my son was thinking about it, he says, I think I'd love the discipline, Dad. I love the idea of doing things that are harder than any other humans really do. No one, you can have a basketball practice or become a wrestler, do jiu-jitsu, but no one really goes through what basic training, just basic training is a gauntlet that most people don't appreciate. And some guys just like to see if they can do it. What am I made of? I also love the military because when you look at Navy SEALs, for example, and I watch their training, it's always done as a team. And I think it's great for entrepreneurship because you can't be a solopreneur. That's a misnomer. There's no such thing. And you look at this, some big dude football player, and they tap out every time. It's the skinny guy who, is holding that log above his head with his teammates. And the reason he finds that extra fuel isn't because of his own muscle. It's because he's not going to let this guy down. He's not going to let that gal down. He's not going to let down his teammate. Yeah. And so at the same time, my son looked at it. He says, yeah, but I can't be in a box either. So it's a really interesting background to say, I love what this does for me and what it teaches me, but I also don't want to have to say yes sir, no sir, yes sergeant, whatever. So what a great background. And of course Robert Kiyosaki was a Marine, so when I spent that 14 years on his team, it was very militant. He ran it like the military. So that's an impressive background. We thank you for your service.
Wow, thank you, sir.
DeFi.
Appreciate it.
So AI is going to change things. I've been really on the AI. That's been the focus of my study. It's going to eliminate a lot of what people do, but it's also going to eliminate organizations. For example, when you talk about DeFi, I already don't see the need for many of the middlemen. I don't see a need for a bank, really. I don't see a need for really brokerages. There's so many transactions that could be done, and there's so many middle people that could be cut out. And the idea, I think blockchain, for example, one technology, I think it's fascinating. I don't know why we don't use it worldwide to vote. The way the checks and balances, the open ledger, the massive, talk about checks and balances, a global system, at least with Bitcoin and those types of open ledgers, there's something there. I haven't figured out all of it yet, but tell me, it's absolutely something that everyone should take a class on. Not just read your book, but they should take a class because it is going to change, and those that see that coming first and understand how that might take shape. So before we talk about, cryptocurrencies in general, and we're going to get to cash flow after the break because that's the big one. So stay tuned for that. But I think it's important to start off with how this technology is likely to change the landscape of finance.
Yeah, and honestly, the internet as we know it now is the bigger picture. Finance was kind of like a first step. It was a first sector that was obvious to innovate. But yeah, what you mentioned about the ledger and what this technology has done, a trusted ledger, and the questioning the role of middlemen. Right, we've needed middlemen because we need trust. Right, that's really what it comes down to. We need trust, and when you study what this blockchain technology, this open ledger does, is it creates a trustless system, which at first you might hear that word and it might sound negative. Like, what? It doesn't sound like I can trust it at all. Trustless, I want trust. Yeah. And what we mean by that is you're not relying on a counterparty for trust, right? Because the counterparty is human usually. And we're all...
I love that,
go ahead.
That view, not to interrupt, but I love that view because there's a huge counterparty risk in the world. And my opinion is that counterparty risk is growing, and I don't, if you want to have conversational nitroglycerin, let's talk about religion and politics. But
that's a great book on the case for Bitcoin. That's biblical too. It's great.
Well, it's interesting because you talk about trust. If you were to just pull Americans, people in the United States, let alone the world, I mean, if you live in Venezuela or you live in Argentina, the level of trust in your government, because corruption becomes a breach of trust, and I'm very concerned politically about both sides of the aisle. There's this stuff coming out of Justice Departments tapping phones of senators, and is that true? Is it emails and laptops and Russian and this and that? And the division is so rhetorical, so goal-oriented. People are worried about defeating the other party than to healing those relationships. They just want to defeat. It's war. It is. I heard a commentator say this. She said, well, it's not time to work with Democrats anymore. It's time to just defeat them. And I'm like, that's civil war. That's, when you're trying to defeat half of the country, you're trying to go to war. And that is not an environment for, united you stand, divided you fall. So as I look at my trust in in central governments, my trust in fiscal irresponsibility, my trust in the monetary policy, and they'll do their own centralized currency for sure soon. They'll do a centralized digital currency. They're going to do that. But if I live in Argentina and I live in Venezuela and possibly someday when I live in the United States, the ability to hold wealth and the ability to have... When you go from social to primal, how do I know what's mine is mine? How do I keep what's mine? And how do I trust what they will do with money as opposed to? So, you have the US dollar, which is the government currency. You have gold, which you might say is God's currency. And then you have crypto, which might be the people's currency. But talk a little bit more about that. I didn't want to interrupt you and derail the trust, but I think that counterparty risk of powerful entities that you're dependent upon, that's not a small thing. If I put myself in Venezuela right now and I think, if I buy that currency, or in Argentina and I own that currency, the risk is probably something that you and I in the United States might not fully appreciate.
Yeah. And this, like the element of trust to blockchain and distributed ledgers can go really deep, but just to try to keep it simple, but still give people some like profound takeaways, I'd say, Bitcoin was the innovator. There's arguments how it, what is it? It doesn't do anything. What does it do? And on some level, I could see how somebody takes that position. But at this point, it's valuable because it grew to the size of the network that it is now. And so there was a time where you could make a stronger argument on how it's, it has no point. What's the actual value? But at this point, similar to how people, have historically viewed the U.S. in modern times, the value is in the trust that the idea of America, right, is why people value the dollar at this point, since it's not backed by anything hard either.
We're already, in 1971, we already made it a trust in the tax collection.
In a promise.
The power of the U.S. dollar is in the U.S. economy and the ability for the government to tax that prosperity. That's it.
Yeah.
They can make money by simply saying, "Oh, that stuff you thought was yours, let's pass a law and make more of it mine."
And this is where Bitcoin fundamentally changes the game, because initially, there was risk in that system because the network was small, but it caught on to such a degree that the network is so large now that it's infallible, in the sense that if you try to attack it, the way Bitcoin works, it works through something called proof of work, where you have independent third parties verifying the record of the ledger, right? And so if you have 10 stakeholders, you can manipulate a group of 10, but you can't manipulate a group of, thousands, tens of thousands, et cetera, right? It's just too vast of a network of all disinterested, pseudonymous, I think is the word, parties, that they're not all in cahoots with each other. They don't even know who each other are. Mm-hmm. And then with Bitcoin's design, there's an actual tangible cost to doing that proof work, right? And so what's also interesting about Bitcoin is there's so much value in the infrastructure to support the network that it actually, you could argue, it does have value now, because these mining operations, et cetera, are worth something, right? They're worth billions of dollars. And so that, in a way, is backing the network's value. That's an underlying, maybe like philosophical argument there. But the bottom line is Bitcoin established the idea of trust, and the network is so vast and incorruptible at this point that the world has decided it has value to the degree that we're looking at a 6-figure price per token. And it's become like the modern age digital gold, right? That's kind of even the Fed has given that analogy, comparing those two verbally. And so what happened next was we had Ethereum, and Ethereum took it one step further and said, okay, if we can have a distributed network where the record becomes trusted because we can't corrupt it, right? You can get to a point where it's incorruptible. Well, what if we built software that way? Right. And so that's really what Ethereum did. So Ethereum and all these the rest of crypto at Ethereum going forward is all about software. So crypto, blockchain, these buzzwords might sound overwhelming at first, but if you just understand this is all just software, and imagine the ability to build a Facebook where there is no off switch controlled by one man, where you couldn't get deplatformed, where each user, once this software is deployed, it's deployed onto a network where there's so many redundant copies of it. Again, it can't be turned off, so you can't get censored. It brings freedom and ownership to software, and so that opened the door for finance, and that's where DeFi came in, because people said, well, wait a second, we can build we can use smart contract technology, this software mechanism on top of this blockchain technology that will just kind of like a ATM machine, it's programmed to do a certain thing. You swipe the card, you enter and as long as the inputs match the outputs, it performs the operation. And so we could do this now where you have trading, you have lending, you have collateralized loans, you have all this stuff happen, all these financial functions are now happening via software, and we don't have to worry about either a central stakeholder like a private party or a government, doing something either through policy or through just private greed to corrupt the system, right? So it's really amazing. It is challenging the status quo with the role of middlemen.
So you opened up a lot of different avenues for questioning there, and so I'd like to hit on maybe even 3 or 4 and unpack
Sure.
what you just said. First of all, our listeners know this is coming from me because they know how I think pretty well. I think you mentioned that the purpose of Prime DeFi was to educate people. And I think that really separates you from every single crypto person I've ever interviewed or talked to, because I've interviewed a ton of them trying to learn it. And I've walked away less educated. And the reason that is because so many people put an external locus on their investing. And this is really important for everyone to understand, because I think this is where Dan and I align very, very well, is that most people think that their success is determined by picking the right asset, or picking the right asset class in this case. In other words, there's a really unhealthy debate, and it's really an asinine debate. And I get lured into this all the time, and I ruin panels because of it. For example, I was on a panel once, and they had a crypto guy and a real estate guy and a business, put your business, like an Amazon type guy that ran Amazon businesses, and they had a bond guy, and then I was going to be the stock and options guy. And people love debate, and the whole context was, well, which one's the best? Which one's the best opportunity? And so I ruined it on purpose. And I said, let me kind of explain why this is a really, and I'm not going to allow our listeners to fall into this trap. If people see their problem is picking the right asset, they've just created a false context that almost guarantees failure. Because I will just tell everyone right now, the problem people have has nothing to do with the asset class. It has to do with a lack of knowledge. In other words, if people listening today find success in crypto or any other asset, it will be because of a change in what they decided to study and habits they decide to put into their day. And that's why I love Prime DeFi, because of what you do educationally. Because there are pitfalls in stocks, pitfalls in real estate, and there are pitfalls in crypto. And people that pitch crypto never pitch the education piece, because they give the portrayal, well, all I got to do is buy this thing, and it's bulletproof, and it's awesome, and there's nothing to learn about it. It's just it's the silver bullet. And that appeals to the part of our nature that wants a free meal, that wants, like that cheetah. If it finds a sick little deer that can't run, it's like, oh, there's finally a meal that takes no calories, free lunch. Mm-hmm. And that's why I love your approach. It's one of the reasons we invited you on is, Prime DeFi is an education where it's not so much focused on the investment as it's focused on the investor. And as soon as people realize that their success in any asset class is a function of their own personal development rather than the asset class, that is a context for success. So it's not about the crypto or the DeFi or the stock or the real estate. It's about the personal development people gain by understanding it better. So that's the first thing that I wanted to hit. As you mentioned early on, that you said, hey, I'm going to begin to teach people. And I thought, okay, this is a guy that gets it, because everyone else says the secret is crypto, where you've been able to hit more of a bullseye. I say, no. The secret is learning about the crypto. And it is the education deficit that people should be concerned with, more so than just saying, well, this is the holy grail. So I wanted to bring that up. Any comments on that? Then I got 2 more follow-ups.
No, I think you hit it on the head there. It's, there is no perfect opportunity. There's the opportunity that aligns with what you'll get passionate about studying and working on. I think a lot of people who try different things and get burnt out, their heart wasn't in it. Maybe that side hustle business, is not meant for you because you don't see yourself ever being world class at it. And if that's the case, why are you doing it? Because if you're just doing it to make some money, maybe you should be trading stocks, options, educating yourself about crypto and taking a more, a different approach that doesn't put you in charge of running a business. Not everyone's meant to be an entrepreneur. So you got to find what fits. And then like you said, there's pitfalls and everything, and have a real plan and just, be diligent, and eventually you win. But that's the not sexy answer that nobody wants to hear. Right.
But
like with weight loss too.
It's the one they need to hear. The second thing is, and I have very passionate feelings on this that might be incorrect. I often see people, and it's human nature, Thales of Miletus famously said, know thyself. That's such a great maxim. Of all the Greeks, of all 12 Greek sages, he's my favorite. He's the oldest and the first. And that maxim, know thyself, puts the locus of control in here as an investor, and it's better to focus on what I know, what I don't know, what my weaknesses are than externally. And as you think about how this may evolve, it could go one way or the other. It's absolutely possible, if you look how history works, that Bitcoin will have a time, a beginning, and an end. But blockchain probably lasts longer, or maybe Bitcoin stays. Doesn't matter which one it is. What matters is learning. So, for example, when and I don't know, my kids would have no concept of this. Like if I went to my kids and I said Netscape, they'd have no idea what I was talking about. If I said WordPerfect, they'd have no idea. Quattro Pro, no idea what I talk about. Well, Netscape was the internet. That's what the World Wide Web. I'm going to go get on Netscape. That's what it was. Doesn't exist anymore. The hypertext transfer protocol has endured. So the protocols probably have more staying power than how we use them. So maybe Bitcoin's a 30-year, a 40-year, a 50-year thing. Maybe with AI, and when we figure out a better mousetrap, which we will, as soon as they crack things like quantum computing, they'll say, blockchain was awesome. But that's not even the point. The point is, if a person doesn't understand how that might stay or how that might change, they are at a disadvantage. Because, when someone stakes a claim and they're a real estate guy, they're dogmatic. I do real estate and everyone else is an idiot because you can see, touch, and feel real estate. We always need a place to live. And I'll say, no, actually, if you go to L.A., no one has a house down there anymore. You got a few millionaires that have a $10 million home that's 1,000 square feet, but you got a lot of tents. However, all of them have cell phones, so buy Apple. I mean, the dogmatism is a really poor way to go about this. So learning about how, because decentralized finance is going to happen. These middlemen are going to be cut out. And understanding how that can stay the same or how it can change, it's more important to be prepared than I think to predict. Would you concur with that?
Yeah. I mean, we're early in it. We're early enough in it that from an investment point of view, the game is I think having a portfolio that's betting on the right infrastructure for the future of this tech and the future apps. Like you said, the apps will change, right? But there's some groundwork being laid right now that will last. Some of it won't, some of it will, right? Remember like Blu-ray or HD DVD, which medium is going to survive, right? And then digital just took over, which was great. They both became obsolete.
On paper, Ethereum, it has, from the little I know about it, it actually has a greater capability. Mm-hmm. It can do a lot of like you mentioned, it can do a lot of cool things, but it's not as widely held yet as say a Bitcoin is. But Ethereum, you can put algorithms in those blocks, and there's a lot of cool things you can do with Ethereum that people don't know about. And so the basic message is education. Now I'm going to take a little break. When we come back, I'm really excited about this next part of the interview because I'm a cash flow guy. We named our academy the Cash Flow Academy. I'm going to make a case for cash flow when we come back, and I'm going to ask you to help our listeners understand, because I think your approach is different, and understand the importance of cash flow. So we'll take a little break, and when we come back with Dan, we're going to talk about cash flow. Well, and that's, it's the Cash Flow Academy podcast, so we got to have some cash flow coming. So we'll be back in just a moment.
Really, I think anybody can follow Andy's steps to learn this. He made everything so easy. You can actually ask real-time questions with them and get real-time answers. There's so many different trading platforms. They will take the time and be able to show you how to use whichever platform you're on.
I've just really enjoyed how they have taken what could be complex material and really made it simple to understand. Learned how to take some of the complex trading strategies and produce cash flow. They really go beyond just trading stocks. They really make it about lifestyle to make yourself the best person you can be. Everybody that's an expert started out as a novice. You got to start somewhere.
Welcome back to the Cash Flow Academy podcast. I'm your host, Andy Tanner. Been speaking with Dan Ryder, founder of Prime DeFi. We're also going to talk about his upcoming book, how we're going to get into this hidden gold mine of crypto. Let's talk about cash flow. Cash flow is more important as an investor than it's ever been before. And I'll tell you my opinion why, and then I want to see if you can tell people where the opportunity with crypto could be in this, because it's caused me to revisit it. And I always have an open mind on it. And if people say, well, Andy, once you said this, well, I can change my mind. I've changed my mind on a lot of things as I've grown. So I'm a little bit more open to it maybe today than I was maybe 10 years ago or 5 years ago even. The job market, I see two canaries in a coal mine where people should go to Prime DeFi and learn this. They should. Two canaries in a coal mine. Number one, the creative destruction of AI is different than any other creative destruction we've had. If a person is digging a ditch with a shovel and someone invents a backhoe, all that does is create even more jobs to make more backhoes, because we do more work and more work gets done. You're just shifting what the humans do. In fact, you got to have someone to build the backhoe, repair the backhoe, paint the backhoe, maintain the backhoe, drive the backhoe, transport the backhoe, put gas in the backhoe. There's more jobs created. And the same thing happened. Boom, all of a sudden technology hits and everyone needs to be a coder. There's like this huge need for coders. The way AI changes the game, and if you talk to the three main entities that do it, OpenAI, Anthropic, and Google Brain, those three founders all say, here's your problem. This technology is different in that it doesn't create new human jobs, it eliminates them. And the word creative destruction is going to be replaced by this phrase, comparative advantage. In other words, whether it's plumbing, running wire in a house, roofing, bricks, building a car, whatever it is, we have technology that can perceive the environment now. Machines can see for the first time. That's how self-driving cars work. They see. They can take what they see, hear, or smell, or touch, and they can process what should be done with it. And then through robotics, we have fine-tuned instruments that are better than fingers and better than... Amazon didn't employ. Amazon isn't about employment. Amazon is about deployment. Talk about DeFi. How about deployment? Not employment. They deployed their millionth robot last July. 1 million robot, an army of mechanical working. So really entrepreneurs have this choice. Cashier, kiosk, bricklayer, robot. And if you don't believe that, just Google robots that roof a house and it will blow your frickin' mind. And these do not create more jobs. So the rat race is disappearing, and it's terrifying for people that are dependent on the rat race. So there is going to be a run on ownership, in my opinion. As soon as people figure it out, they're going to look around the world and say, what is valuable? And you're going to have three things that are valuable: real estate, companies and commodities, which I would say crypto is very well described as a commodity. I would say it is closer to gold than it is to, say, real estate or something. And this rush to ownership will have a massive impact. The second part of this is buybacks. Yesterday, I looked at the top 10 buybacks. It's $500 billion. So the shares that are available, there's a limited amount of stocks to own. There's a limited amount of real estate to own. And famously, there's a limited amount of Bitcoin to own. There's 22 million, or whatever it is. It's like in the 20 millions, I know. I forget the number. It's like 20 some odd million.
Yeah.
He didn't pick 20 million. It had to be 20 point whatever, and that's going to be it. As this gold rush happens to ownership, it is going to widen the wealth gap. The middle class will continue to be dissolved, and you'll have the poverty line, which has already been established by UBI, which is called Social Security for Old People. We already have UBI, and that's where the poverty line always is. And you have no control to be what you want to be, because now the government will decide your standard of living. You don't get to be great. You don't give it basically steals your freedom. You can't get better because you can't work. There's not enough jobs. There's a few, but there's not enough jobs. So when people rush to ownership, that's going to be big. Now, here's the problem. I'll never sell another share of stock again. I don't think I'll ever sell another stock. I don't think I'll ever sell another piece of real estate, and I don't think I'll sell any of my crypto ever again. The way I cash flow my crypto is not my favorite, so I'd like to learn other ways. But when I've bought, I don't buy and sell crypto anymore, but because I'm just not going to sell anything. Mm-hmm. Ownership is too important now. And if I think I'm going to buy low and sell high, the moment I sell for cash, I'm dead, because I no longer have a golden goose. Yeah. So even though my stocks have doubled, and since COVID, some of them have done a lot better and doubled, it means nothing to me. Bitcoin at 100,000 a coin means nothing to me, because if I sell it, I've lost my asset. So that's a long-winded way of getting to the point of cash flow, is that if you take a Warren Buffett approach and you say, look, I didn't buy this to hope to sell it someday. I didn't get married to get divorced. I got married to have kids. I got married to multiply. And so tell me how, like I love to sell, like a lot of people, when I would buy a Bitcoin, and this was back, I bought my first Bitcoin at $300. And I bought it out of curiosity to learn how to do it, and I forgot about it. I opened up like 12 wallets trying to figure out how to do it. So I have all these pass keys and all this shit, to figure out the thing. And then it hit 10,000. And I go to Marcia. I says, I think I bought some of that. I think I did. I think I bought a couple of those coins. So I'm going through emails and trying to find, and sure enough, there it was,
Yeah.
Well, what I started
good that you
to do
found
when
it.
There's
people who have that story only without the happy ending.
when it hit around 40 to 60 grand the first time before it pulled back down, I started selling put options against my cash, and I was getting paid, probably $2,000-$3,000 to promise to buy it maybe 5% higher or lower than it was. So, let's say Bitcoin's at 60, I'd sell a 30-day option and get cash in my pocket to buy it, let's say at like 55, 56, something like that. And then once I owned it, I would sell a call at a higher rate where it'd really have to climb for me to sell it. Now, the problem I had with it is the options market isn't as liquid in crypto as it is in stocks. The spreads are pretty rough, I'll be honest. Mm-hmm. But the concept is sound in terms that there are ways for me to cash flow and create new cash, golden eggs, without having to watch the price around the golden goose neck. I think too many people get excited about the price around the neck of the golden goose, saying, wow, look how expensive my goose is. I think I'll sell it. And they don't know how important eggs are. So that's a very long-winded way, and I apologize, but that context is critical. That as the opportunity to work for money shrinks, and as companies are buying back more of their shares, reducing the amount of shares. As more people buy Bitcoin and take my stance, refusing to sell, the harder it will become to get these commodities. There are people who will not sell their Bitcoin because there's just not enough of them. There's more millionaires than Bitcoins. Like every millionaire in the world can't buy a Bitcoin because there's not enough Bitcoins for every millionaire.
Yeah.
So tell me, that's a long-winded way. I'm going to hand you the mic and shut up for a minute. Tell me about cash flow.
Yeah.
How do I take ownership of cryptos and retain ownership of that and still cash flow?
Yeah, and as I get into that, I'll just kind of echo briefly what you just said about what's actually happening and the importance of ownership, especially with crypto, because we are entering a new age, right? If you look at the past, we had the information age, right? We had the age of the printing press, and then we had a production age, right? We had all these different ages, the industrial age, and then finally, fast forward, we're in the information age. And if you look back, the wealthiest legacy families, the Vanderbilts, et cetera, that we hear about, what do? They invested in those booming stores of value that defined their time, and they just didn't sell, right? They kept the asset in the family, right? And so here we are, and modern day, I would argue that we've exited the information age, and now we're entering into what I think is an autonomous age, is what I'm calling it. And it includes things like blockchain tech and AI. And value,
I would agree with that.
Is changing.
Except I would agree with that with one caveat. I think we went from the information age to the misinformation age.
Yeah, there's that
now
step
to the
in
autonomous
between.
age.
Yeah. And so,
but autonomy is a big deal, right?
Yes. And so, Bitcoin's unique in its design in that it could be just perceived as value, nothing but value in terms of definition. But now we have other things that have utility. Like, what is the new utility? Well, the traditional utility is things like, metals, right? Metals, gas, right? Oil, right? These are things that literally drive traditional utilities. Electricity, right? Like, they drive human life, right? And human productivity. Well, in this new digital autonomous age where we have things like AI, software, everything we do is more and more digital focused, right? You mentioned coders, right? There's new career paths taking over. This new utility is something to own. It's something to own. Things like Ethereum, like it's the infrastructure that's powering the future of this utility, right? So the key is to own it, is to get a piece of it, and to not sell it, right? And as amazing as it is to think like, oh man, Bitcoin's 6 figures, it might be hard to fathom that it could hit $1 million, but if you zoom out and you look at, it's
probably hard to fathom it would hit 100,000.
Oh yeah,
back when it was 300.
And it's literally the same argument, but really, like, why in July earlier we had a holder who had Bitcoin for about 10 years. They liquidated 10 billion, right? They were a decade-long holder. 10 billion got liquidated. They finally decided to exit, and they did it for, billions of dollars. Good for them, right? Okay. Yeah. That's the one exception. You're allowed to sell if you're going to get 10 billion, right? And so what was interesting was how quickly the market gobbled that up. Like, it didn't crash the price. It blipped 1% to 2% for a moment because we have this next wave, the next generation of holders, Wall Street, traditional finance, right? Governments, they see this and they see, oh wow, the crypto market cap is single digits. Forget Bitcoin, all of crypto is single digits. The NASDAQ, gold, the S&P 500, these are $25 to $50 million market cap, or $1 trillion market caps, excuse me. So, we're like at least a 10x from even that. So you think about a 6-figure Bitcoin, 1 million is written in destiny with the trajectory of the whole asset class. And so, yes, we want to own it. We want to not get distracted by, oh man, I got in now and I 3x'd. If I exit now, I'll make some money, but how else can I hold, right?
That is so important. And I don't want people to miss this point, because everyone that pitches real estate to me, and everyone that pitches stocks to me, and everyone that pitches, they are so capital gain focused. I'll give you an example. I bought a company, CCJ. I bought a company that sells uranium. And the reason I bought it is the grid, the bottleneck in AI to general AI, and then super, we're probably 5 years from super general intelligence. The bottleneck isn't software anymore, and the bottleneck isn't hardware anymore. It used to be, well, we need to have the software, but we have the hardware doesn't have the balls to do it, or whatever, the ability to do it. But it's the electricity they don't have. So these guys are all buying and investing in nuclear, their own, like, think the scale of a large city, like that much power, a nuclear power plant that can do this. So, okay, great. And the stock has gone through the roof since I bought it. And it was like, great, great, great. I go, no, it's meaningless to me because I can't sell. Because if I sell, I have no asset. And so I may have some cash. And so what you're saying, people say, well, Andy, it might go to $1 million. I'm like, so? I can't sell because you've got to have a goal. You can't sell the thing that's generating the cash.
Yeah.
And so tell me a little bit more about how a person can hold their crypto and generate cash.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I will say this, I'm slightly pragmatic here, where if somebody's been in the market long enough and they can experience some substantial life change by taking some chips off the table.
Sure,
if you put in 100, 200 grand, you find yourself, all of a sudden sitting on $1 million, and you could pay off your mortgage that has another 100 grand left. And it gives you this joy and peace of mind for decades to come. Why not, right? Do it. But then you still keep the majority of it, right? So how do we unlock this capital? Well, this isn't a new idea. You can look at what do executives, right? What do Elon Musk and some of the wealthiest people who are major shareholders in their companies, what do? What do real estate people do who scale real estate portfolios? They leverage responsibly, right? So you keep the asset, you unlock its value by responsibly lending against it, right? And then you can use those funds to scale, right? Real estate guys might fund the next deal with it. And so you kind of keep scaling your portfolio that way. And eventually you have the cash flow level that you want to hit. Or, if you were a business guy, you had a business seed, you wanted to unlock some liquidity, you could borrow responsibly against your asset. So these are ways that you can leverage the asset and get liquid without selling. And then there's a step further in that, if we go back to something we talked about earlier, there's decentralized finance opportunities where middlemen, such as exchanges, for example, that charge trading fees, right? When you go to Coinbase or Robinhood or wherever you trade, Ameritrade, everyone who's ever used those products and services, all great, fantastic services, and their business model is based around those fees, right? You pay a couple bucks to make your trades. That is their business model. Well, in DeFi, they don't exist. And so that service of establishing a market has now been crowdsourced. The function of the match the buyers with the sellers is automated. So what does it need? It needs inventory, right? The vending machine needs to get stocked. And who typically stocks the vending machine at Coinbase? Big market makers, right? They have partnerships on the back end with really big suppliers that participate. And classically, the little guy has needed, billions of dollars and bank charters to participate in this world. Well, because of DeFi, all that is crowdsourced, right? The infrastructure has allowed anyone to contribute inventory. So you have these markets, these pools of assets trading, whether that's digital dollar stablecoins, Bitcoin, Ethereum, etc. These are all being traded on DeFi markets, which are fundamentally the same in concept as a traditional market. Only the middleman is gone, and instead of paying the middleman the fee actually, when the trader comes to use the service on a DeFi market, the fee goes to the participants who supported that market, who provided the inventory, right? So it's kind of like saying, hey, there's this ATM business out there, and they said that if I let them borrow some of my cash, I'll get a cut of all those little fees that everyone's paying to use the ATM. But it's still my cash, and I can still take it out at any time, right? And so you get to stay liquid and participate in trading fees. And there's a lot of actually similarity. It's a different mechanism, but it reminds me in some ways of the options world in traditional stock and option opportunities. It's kind of similar in concept, but the mechanism is totally different. So, you can earn these trading fees. That's cash flow, right? That's
Absolutely.
a business model that now you have access to that you never had access to before because the middleman's gone. And that's just one thing you can do, right? I mean, there's so many that we talk about, in our community because there's so much to be educated on. It's exciting.
It's essential education. A lot of people have a 401k and own equities and bonds. A lot of people have them, but they don't cash flow. That's where, as a paper asset guy, we're all about it. Like if you don't know how to cash flow your stuff, a lot of people might have a house, but if they're not renting it, they're crazy. And maybe this is a oversimplified analogy of what you've said, but I think it might help the listeners. My dad, he's retired. He's an octogenarian, staring 90 in the face now, and he's got a box of cash, in his safe, in a shoebox, just with rubber bands around it. Yeah. And I said, Dad, and he's worried because he's kind of getting ready for, he's not sick or anything, but when you hit 90, you're like, all right, I got to get my affairs in order just in case. And he's worried because my mom's a lot younger than he robbed the cradle bad. My mom's a lot younger. And he's worried about her. He's like, man, if I check out of here. And I said, well, Dad, first of all, you don't want to leave her a shoebox of cash. So I says, look, you don't need to have a lot of intelligence to do this. We're having inflation. Go buy an I-bond. And what he's really doing is crowdsourcing the government with currency. He's crowdsourcing the government. He's taking a currency. It's not a digital currency, but in reality, it kind of is. But I says, take that and just buy an I-bond, and you'll at least keep up with inflation that way, mm-hmm. and you'll create new cash. You got to have these little rabbits multiply, Dad. And I think that's a very poor man's way or an oversimplified way of saying, just as the government looks to crowdsource cash and then give you back new cash in addition, because he's still going to get that cash by loaning it, but he's creating more cash by not just having it sit there. Well, the same is true with your real estate. Rent it, create more cash, don't just have it sit there. Same is true of stock. Write a covered call, make more cash, don't just have it sit there. Same with crypto. Use your crypto to help people source what they need and get cash, whether it's trading fees or what have you. That's way oversimplified, I know, which is why you go to primedefi.com and learn, because it's not exactly that simple, but Dan can walk you through it step by step. Is that fair? That's probably oversimplifying.
No, that's a great analogy, because really, once you get the concept, you can learn the button presses. It's really something that's amazed me is that when we launched our community a couple of years ago, it's been about 3 years now. I just expected younger people to be in it, right? And what I found was that the average age in our community is upper 50s, right? And we've even got plenty of people in their 60s and even some people in their 70s. And I remember the first couple of times we had folks come in, I was like, man, are they gonna, it's gonna sound like I'm being like an ageist or whatever, but I was like, man, I hope. And I remember this one guy, he asked a question in our group, and I was like, it kind of alerted me because it was kind of like it was a Mickey Mouse question, let's call it that, right? And there are, we have a great community. There are no silly questions. You can ask anything. But this one just kind of made me pay attention a little bit, right? And I was like, okay, let's get him help. Let's make sure he's good to go. And then he kind of disappeared, and then he came back, 3 weeks later, and he asked another question, and it was kind of a question. It's funny, I don't even remember what the questions were. I just remember how I felt when I read them, and I was like, man, should we have, brought this guy in? Like, is this the right thing for him? Like, I started to, I want to make sure that we are serving those that we can help, right? There's that saying that anyone can do something, but sometimes, it's just not a good fit for somebody, right?
Right, no question.
But But we answered his question, and then I started doing a little bit due diligence on how he was enrolled into the program, and I was like, no, we went through all the stuff with him. He knew what would be involved, and yeah, he's going through it. More power to him. And then 3 months later, he's like a rock star. He's a total rock star, and he's sharing all this cool stuff he's been doing behind the scenes, acting on the education he got. And I was like, wow, that is so amazing. Like, it just, he became like a poster boy.
Nice.
So, and that's just one of so many stories where we've seen people come in, and what I realized is like, wow, there's some things that aren't intuitive about DeFi because it's early. Just like the internet wasn't super intuitive, but as long as you're not a total basket case, like if you know how to check your email, if you know how to do online banking, if you use social media, and in a reasonable amount of time, then you have the baseline education that you need to come to us and learn how you can participate in DeFi. It's not just a young man's game. And in fact, it should be for the older demographic, the older Gen Xers, the baby boomers, because if you look at the wealth distribution in our country, that's where most of the wealth is. It's in those age groups, and this is one of the biggest opportunities of this lifetime. And especially now with the timing, we're not going to get another, like once a market matures from 3 trillion to 5 trillion to 10 trillion to 20 trillion, it loses that exponential pizzazz, right? That upside. It just gets more typical, right? And so this could be because Wall Street now for the first time is seriously in the crypto market. This could be the last life-changing, oh my gosh, amazing story. I can't believe I got into this. And I don't want to hype up the industry so much, but this could be the last time where you see that, oh, I wish I would have got in if I missed Amazon. If only I got into Amazon before it mooned, right? A lot of people have a story like that. And this demographic is like the most poised to benefit from it, responsibly, of course. I'd almost say that I saw this stat. Another guy I respect, Rick Edelman, traditional guy. He's a well-known author in personal finance and retirement. He recently has gotten very vocal about crypto education for financial advisors, right? Because they're not up to speed. And he put together what I thought was a brilliant aha that everyone should hear, right? Even if you're doing things yourself, it's important. If you have someone else managing your money, it's important because you want to raise this question to that person if they're not on the train yet, on the bandwagon. Because at this point, unlike a few years ago, if you just look at the total value of investable assets in the U.S., you got 50 million in the S&P, right? You got in the bond market, there's another 50 or so million, right? So even if you just count those two, and you pepper in crypto, which is at about 4 trillion, right? You got four out of 104. Let's just call it that. It's about 3%. When you divide that, it's about 3%. It's a little under 4. So 3% of all possible investable assets are crypto. Mm-hmm. So if you're not, at least, no matter what your retirement account, your 401, your brokerage account looks like, if 3% of your wealth is not in crypto, you are betting against the marketplace. And so if you consider yourself risk averse and you don't want to be long or short, you need to have 3% in crypto at this point, or you are short, right? And I was like, wow, what a brilliant argument, for, and then, he goes on to say, actually, he's probably advocated for closer to 10%, even for those folks who are, more senior in their life path. But like timing is so critical, and there's opportunities to get in for upside and keep it so you can pass it down or hold it, no matter how old you are. Keep it, don't let go of it, and just use these innovations in DeFi to cash flow off of it, and you could have the tangible benefits, while holding the asset.
the demographic is interesting. Age 55 to 65, the median 401k balance is less than 100,000. And yet for the young people, they're going to college now, learning whatever's in any textbook they're going to have a Nobel Prize winner or the equivalent in their pocket with AI. There's nothing you can learn in college that AI doesn't already know. Chat GDP already knows everything you can possibly learn in college in a textbook. It's already read the textbook and it understands it better than we do already. We're running out of time, but I do want to just give me a little 30-second preview. My temptation was to wait until the book was done, but the time is, we got to get going on this sooner, even though you're close. And we'll just have you back when the book is released. I hope you come back.
Yeah, I'd love to.
When the book is released. But tell us a little bit about this hidden gold mine you're writing about. Just a little 30-second blurb, if you would.
Sure. So the book is called The Hidden Digital Gold Rush, Decoding DeFi, right? So in this book, after working with about 2,000 people now and teaching them DeFi, mostly people above 40, closer to 50, 60 years old, we had different versions of our training that we innovated as we saw where people get stuck, right? Our whole goal in Prime DeFi is to help people get through to these milestones of, I got my first crypto, even if you know nothing, right? I got my first crypto. I know what it means to self-custody my crypto, to take it off of the exchange and secure it. And I know how to participate in these DeFi opportunities. How do we get people through those steps faster? And we came up with a framework called Prosper. It's an acronym that we walk people through. It's our system, if you want to call it our system. And so this book, we give people the fundamental story and why crypto is important. And we also walk them through our framework as much as we can in a book. But man, I'm so excited about this book because there's so much value in it, where people will be able to read this book and literally go get started, right, on their own. And then if they want to go deeper, find a community like ours, they're more than welcome to check us out. But we walk them through this Prosper framework, and we share stories from people that we've worked with in our community. So when you're on Peace, the first P is for plan, right? You gotta have a plan, right? And so what does that mean for crypto and DeFi investing? And we walk through that systematically, what to do. We share a story or anecdote from our community, and then we give you the step-by-step in the book. And we just do that throughout each chapter, and we equip you with what you need to go take this on and be excited. So it's called The Hidden Digital Gold Rush. And another reason why it's hidden is DeFi as an industry. Crypto is about 4 trillion in market cap right now, give or take. DeFi, which is like the kind of like underground, right? It's behind the middleman exchanges. It's directly on the blockchain, like all this innovation where you can go buy, trade, loan, borrow, etc. The total market cap of all the assets floating around in DeFi, it's about 200 billion right now as we're doing this call, right? 200 billion versus 4 trillion. I mean, it's a little baby, and it's growing exponentially, and no one knows about it, and it's ripe with opportunity for the little guy, because it'll take too long for Wall Street to get in there. It's too complex. There's too much red tape, but the individual investor is nimble. They have the advantage of speed and agility, and you could just get in there and really exploit something truly untapped. I cautiously say that, but it is true. And so, we're going to teach you how to get into this hidden digital gold rush, and we're going to decode DeFi through this Prosper framework in this book, and share real stories of people who've done it before you, so you can go do it yourself. So the book is imminently launching. I'm so excited. We'll have it on Amazon soon, and other ways, I'm sure. But we'll have you back. Dan Ryder, thanks so much for sharing with us. Great conversation. I hope everyone enjoyed it. Dan, hang out after I close the show so I can properly thank you for your time. You've been watching and listening to the Cashflow Academy podcast. Remember, like, subscribe, check out primedefi.com, check out cashflowbonus.com. Hope you enjoyed our conversation. We'll see you next time.